right, guys, today we're going to talk about integers, adding and subtracting. You did a fantastic job on this in 6th grade, and so we are going to go back over some topics just as a review today, and you're going to use these same strategies in 7th grade. So integers, adding and subtracting. So let's go back over what we remember from 6th grade. So what are our integer rules? So remember, if we have same signs, we are going to add. Same signs you add. And same signs means we have two positives or we have two negatives, okay? Remember that different signs, so meaning we have one positive and one negative number, we will subtract. All right, and then our final rule is to keep the sign of the larger number, All right, keep the sign of the larger number. And remember, when we say larger, we mean the number with the largest absolute value. Okay. All right, our next rules that we're going to remember is, remember, if we have two evils, right, two negatives right next to each other, right, two negatives right next to each other, two negatives, two evils, we're going to make a positive. So remember last year we took our fingers and we held up two negatives, and when we put them together, they make a positive sign. So two negatives make a positive. And then our last one is when we have a good versus evil, where we have two signs inside of our circle. Remember that evil wins. And remember, we did that evil laugh last year. Remember, evil meaning negative is going to win. All right. And so that's kind of a review of our rules. So let's go over some positive vocabulary. So what are some words that are going to tell us it is a positive number, or is it a number that's going up, etc.? Positive vocabulary. Well, our first one is gain. We could also say ascend. What does ascend mean? Ascend means he goes up. So he ascended the mountain. He climbed the mountain. We could also say uphill, right? Going uphill. We might also say the word above. Another one is we deposited into our bank account. Deposit. Okay. We might also say asset. An asset is a positive. So that's not a full list, but that's a really good starting point for us. And then on the right side, let's talk about some negative vocabulary. So vocabulary that is going to go down. So we might say lose. We might say descend. So that sounds like ascend, but the beginning is that D, descend, ascend. So make sure you know the difference. D meaning down. All right, we have downhill. Downhill. We might say below, below sea level, or below freezing. We might talk about diving. If I dive into the water, I'm going down. If we're talking money, we might be making a withdrawal. We might be withdrawing money from our bank account. And remember, the opposite of an asset is a liability. So liabilities are also negatives. Again, not a full list, but it is a really good starting point for us. So what I'm going to do is we're going to practice this strategy by starting at the back of our number. And remember, we start at the back and we circle to the back of the next number. So let's actually do that. So we're going to start at the very back of my problem. I'm going to circle all the way to the back of the 6. I'm going to start at the back of the 6 and circle to the front. And the reason that we circle is that way we know which signs go with which numbers. Notice that there's never a sign behind the number. It's always signs in front of the number. So if I was going to rewrite -6, what would I write? Well, I would just write -6. There's only one sign, so I know that's the number, -6. Now, the next one is a little tricky because we have two negatives. So what did we learn about two negatives? Well, we learned that two evils make a positive. So that is actually going to be a positive 4. So I'm going to rewrite it underneath as positive 4. So now that I've rewritten, now I can create my positive negative table. So I'm going to put my numbers. My 6 was negative, so I'm going to write it under the negative side. And my 4 was positive, so I'm going to write it under the positive side. And now it's like I have two competing teams. Let's say these are soccer teams, soccer team positive and soccer team negative. Which team has more players? Which team has the greatest absolute value, right? Which team has more players? Well, that's going to be team negative. So whatever I get for my answer, I know that my answer is going to be a negative number because team negative had more players. So if I have teams on opposite sides, I am going to follow the rule of different signs subtract. So I'm going to grab my two numbers, 6 and 4, and I'm going to subtract them. 6 minus 4, and I am going to get 2. And so my answer is negative 2. Now, how could I prove this on my number line? Well, I can do that really easily. I'm going to use the same two numbers I came up with here, and I'm going to start at 0, okay? So I'm going to grab, and I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to go back to negative 6. So I started at 0, went back to negative 6. And then I need to go forward, back to the positive side, 4 spaces. So first I'm going to do it with my highlighter here. 4 spaces would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that I kind of tested it out, let's go back in. I'm starting at that 6 now, going back 4 spaces. And where did I end up? Right there at negative 2. So my number line and my answer are matching. So that's just one way we can use that number line to double check ourselves. All right, let's check out our next example. So our next example is a triplet, meaning that it has 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3. So we're still going to follow all of the same steps. I'm going to start by circling. So I'm going to start at the back of the problem, circle from the back of the 7 to the back of the 8. I'm going to start from the back of the 8 and go to the back of the 4, and then the 4 to the front. And then I'm just going to rewrite what is inside of my circles. So my first circle is just negative 4, no extra signs. My second circle has 2 signs. We have both a positive and a negative. We can see the positive here and the negative here. So that is a good versus evil situation. So evil is going to win. So I'm going to write that as just negative 8. And our last circle, again, has 2 signs. We have a negative here and a negative here. And again, that is 2 negatives or 2 evils make a positive. So that is actually going to turn into positive 7. So now that we've done that, we can go create our positive negative table. I'm going to put all my numbers where they belong. My 4 is a negative, my 8 is a negative, and my 7 is a positive. And so because I have multiple players on team negative, I need to combine them. Remember, our rule is same signs you add. So I'm going to combine all the players here on team negative, and that's going to equal 12. I'm going to go ahead and bring down my team positive of just 7, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark out this top piece. So now I'm only looking at my players at the bottom. I have either 7 on team positive or 12 on team negative. Which team has more players? Well, definitely 12 is larger, and so I am going to use the negative team as my winning symbol. Okay, so I know whatever I get, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put a big old negative sign on my answer. All right, again, then I have players on each different teams, so I need to follow the different signs subtract rule. So I am going to grab my 12 and my 7 and subtract them because they're competing teams. 12 minus 7 is 5, and my final answer is going to be -5. So then how could we prove it with counters? It says prove with counters. So we're going to use these same numbers that we came up with here, and I'm going to draw counters for them. So my first -4, I'm going to draw 4 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to do -8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then underneath, I'm going to do my positive counters of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm just going to make my 0 pairs. So this positive and negative make 0, and 0, and 0, and 0, and 0, and 0, and 0. And then what do we have left over? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 negatives. So my counters and my answer match. So again, that's an easy way we can double check ourselves with counters. You could have even solved with counters if you like drawing better. Our last example is a word problem. So let's look at our word problem. It says the temperature in Denver, Colorado was 55 degrees on Friday. And it dropped 38 degrees. So dropped is going to be a negative vocabulary word on Saturday. And then it rose 5, so that's a positive vocabulary word on Sunday. And then again, it went back and dropped 23 on Monday. So again, dropped is a negative. So my original number was a positive number on Friday. And so what I am going to do to stay organized is I'm going to make myself a little table. So I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday. Okay, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And the question says, what was the temperature after the drop on Monday? So we need to know what is the temperature going to be after that Monday temperature change. So let's write out our numbers into our little table here. So we had Friday, it was 55. Saturday, and that's a positive 55. Saturday, it dropped 38. Sunday, it rose 5. And Monday, it dropped again 23. So there's all my integers. And so now that I have them all laid out in my table, I can easily create my positive negative table. So 55 belongs on the positive side, 38 is on the negative side, 5 is on the positive, and 23 is on the negative. And so because we have lots of players on both team positive and team negative, we're going to follow that original rule again, which is same signs you add. So we need to go through and we need to add together my teammates. So 55 and 5 make 60 players on team positive, so I'm all done up there. And then 38 and 23 make 61 players on team negative. So again, we ask ourselves, which team has more players? Well, team negative is at 61, which I know is greater than 60. So my answer is going to be a negative number. And then I have to decide, okay, well, if it's a good versus, if it's a different signs, right? There are different signs. We have some on team positive and some on team negative. So because they're different, we are going to use our subtraction. And so I'm going to say, okay, 61 take away 60 leaves one extra player. And remember, that player was on team negative. And so my final answer is -1 degrees. So it's quite cold in Denver, Colorado that Monday, -1 degrees. And that's your refresher on adding and subtracting integers, guys. Go be successful.